They said a throne belongs to the first son. But on the red soil of Zaraland, thrones bow to the one who can hold the spear, and keep it steady when the storm arrives. Amina was born a girl. Jade laughed at that. He stopped laughing the day she pointed an assegai at his throat and said, "Touch my mother again, and this kingdom will learn that a woman's hand can be heavier than a king's crown." This is African Tales by Ijele. Like, share and subscribe for more. The sky over Zaraland wore a red scarf that evening, the kind of sunset that makes elders go quiet. Drums were already beating low when the scouts returned. They came on dusty feet, faces hard, eyes on the ground. The palace gates opened like a mouth in prayer, and closed again in mourning. At the front, 2 men carried a cowhide bundle. They unwrapped it in the courtyard. Inside lay the king's assegai, King Chaka Chaka's spear, its blade dark with dried blood, its shaft nicked by 100 fights. No body. Only the spear. The men knelt. Queen Mia pressed both hands to her chest and staggered. The old chief of council, his beard white as salt, touched the spear as if it could still answer him. He fell like a tree in the storm, the scout whispered. He took many with him. The enemy burned the bodies. We saved this. By custom, the spear returns before the crown moves. That night, smoke climbed into the sky like a slow prayer. Queen Mia wept until the moon folded in on itself. 2 days later, her breathing grew thin, her grief took her the same road as her king. In the palace, silence lived in the corners. The kingdom needed a ruler. Prince Jade swaggered into the council hut with rings on his fingers and wine on his breath. He smiled at the elders, a lazy smile that said, "I'm first son, open the gate." "My father's chair is empty," he declared. "A chair does not stay empty long." The chief rose slowly. In Zaraland, a king must be a shield. He must carry the spear and prove he can fight for us. Jade laughed. "Spear? Do you choose kings by wood and iron?" A figure stepped into the light. Prince Duka, quiet, broad-shouldered, eyes like steady charcoal. He had watched the borders while his father fought. He had practiced the spear since boyhood, when the shaft was taller than he was. He did not smile. He only looked at the weapon and bowed his head. The test happened at dawn in the training field. The red dust rose around them. Jade threw a spear at a straw target and missed so badly the guards looked away. He tried again, overbalanced, and landed on his knees. Duka said nothing. When it was his turn, he lifted the old king's assegai, felt its weight, then stepped, swung, and sent it whistling through the air. It struck the center of the target, ripped through, and sank into the pole behind with a heavy sound that tasted like certainty. The council did not need a long speech. "Zaraland chooses defense over desire," the chief said. "Duka, son of Chaka Chaka, is king." Jade's smile died. In its place grew a hot, humming anger. "You will regret this." King Duka was crowned under the shade of the big marula tree. The people ululated. The drums changed rhythm. Duka's face remained calm, but when he touched his father's spear, his jaw tightened. He had not asked for the crown, but he would carry it like a shield. That night, Jade demanded that their father's lands be shared. "Give me what is mine," he shouted. "I will rule my own people." Duka agreed, peace first, pride last. Jade chose the large distant land, far from the heart of Zaraland. He marched away with his friends, some soldiers, many gourds of beer, and a chest of meat. He called himself king before he built a single fence. In the palace, King Duka stood on the balcony and watched the moon climb. He wrapped his hand around the spear. The wind smelled of rain and something else, trouble walking on bare feet. King Duka ruled with a quiet hand. He walked the farms, listened to disputes, trained with the guards at dawn. When he laughed, it was rare and honest. The people began to rest their backs again. He married a woman whose beauty was the kind that did not need to shout, Queen Nia. Her eyes held steady courage, and when she spoke, people leaned forward. The palace softened. Years later, a daughter was born. They named her Amina. She arrived with a loud cry and a tightened fist, as if she had reached for something on her way into the world. Queen Nia could not conceive again. Whispers floated, the king needs a son. Duka would lift Amina, kiss her forehead, and say, this one is enough to carry a mountain. He did not trade his peace for people's noise. Far away, Jade's kingdom was a drum that never stopped beating. Men drank from sunrise to moonrise. Women came and went. No farms. No work. Meat finished. Grain finished. Wine dried. The laughter began to sound cracked. And when the pots went quiet, Jade remembered his brother. He came crawling back to Zaraland, smiling with his full set of teeth, asking for food, for the sake of brotherhood. Duka fed him. Once. Twice. Many times. Each time, Jade's eyes roamed the palace, touching gold, measuring guards, lingering too long on Queen Nia. When Duka rode out to inspect the borders, Jade would slither in with 2 or 3 men. He would talk too close to Nia, fill the corridors with his smell of wine and pepper soup. This throne is mine, he'd whisper as if the walls were deaf. Your husband is keeping my seat warm. He has no son. This kingdom will return to the true line. Amina heard. Amina always heard. She was 10 when she first held a training spear. The shaft shook in her hands, but she squeezed until her knuckles turned white. The palace guard laughed kindly and tried to take it back. She did not let go. Again, she said. At night, by the moon, she watched the veterans drill, low stances, shield angles, the step and thrust that wins close fights. She copied in secret, blister after blister blooming across her palms. Queen Nia found her one night, breathless and sweating behind the grain stores. Why? Amina's answer was simple. Because when father rides out, the walls are thinner. And Jade is a wind that likes to push thin walls. Nia's face hardened. She pulled a cowhide from the basket and cut it herself, shaping a small shield. The next morning, a palace veteran adjusted the strap and nodded. If a shield will live in your hand, learn to make your arm heavy. Jade returned again the next week, drunk on a courage that did not last until morning. He tried to corner Queen Nia near the northern corridor. Amina stepped between them, shield up, spear forward, feet set wide. Jade smirked. Little girl, move. Amina did not move. Take one more step and you will learn what my name means. His men laughed. He reached. The spear but struck his wrist like a hammer. He shouted. The shield shoved him backward. He stumbled, slipped, fell. Laughter from the guards this time, not kind. Jade's eyes turned into 2 small fires. When King Duka returned, Jade's story was a song of innocence. A family misunderstanding, he called it, smiling like a wound that refuses to close. Duka looked at Amina. She nodded once. He believed her, and said nothing to Jade. Not yet. Peace first. Pride last. That night, Amina unwrapped her hands. New blisters. New strength. Zaraland woke before the sun. Fog lay on the fields like a sleeping animal. Amina crept to the training ground, spear in one hand, new cowhide shield in the other. She planted her feet the way the veterans had taught her, left forward, knees bent, weight low. The captain of the guard watched from the shade. Again, he said. Shorter thrust. Turn your hip. Let the shield talk before the spear finishes the sentence. She drilled until sweat drew rivers down her back. Her braid stuck to her neck. When the sun broke fully, the captain tossed her a water gourd. You fight to protect, he said. Not to prove. Remember the difference. Soon, news came, a border farm had been raided. Not by Jade this time, by hungry men who had once followed him and now roamed like dogs around an empty pot. Duka prepared to ride. Amina stood before him in her short leather skirt, chest wrapped, shield on her arm. Let me come. Not yet, Duka said. Learn more. Father, she said quietly, the time to learn is when the lesson is real. Queen Nia watched both of them, two stubborn hearts that beat the same. At last, Duka nodded. You'll stay at the rear. You will obey the captain. They rode out together, cowhide shields flashing, spearheads catching light, boots pounding the red earth. The raiders scattered at the sight of real soldiers. Amina held the rear as ordered, but a stray attacker charged a young guard at the flank. The boy froze. Amina moved, shield up, step right, spear thrust. The tip cut the raider's arm, he dropped his blade and ran. The young guard stared, ashamed and grateful. Rear means rear, the captain barked when it was over. Amina lowered her head. Yes, Captain. On the ride back, dust in their mouths, the horizon warm like a coal, a messenger galloped hard from the city. He slid off his horse, chest heaving. Prince Jade entered the market square with a band, he gasped. He says King Duka has no son. He says the throne must prepare for him. Duka's jaw worked. He handed Amina his water. Drink, he said. To the captain, double the gate guard. No blood if we can help it. If he forces it, we answer. They entered the city at twilight. Jade stood on a cart, shouting, arms wide as if blessing people. Some listened, most turned away. Amina led her horse through the crowd. Jade's eyes found her. He smiled a snake's smile. Ah, the little soldier. Amina did not look away. Leave while your feet still know the road. Jade leaned forward. One day your father will not return. What will you hide behind then? Your mother's skirts. Behind law, Amina said calmly. Behind people who have eaten peace and do not want your hunger. That night, Amina climbed the palace tower alone. The wind tugged at her hair. The city lights flickered like small promises. She planted her spear beside her, placed the shield at her feet, and spoke into the wind. I, Amina, daughter of Duka and Nia, swear on this red earth, Jade will not wear my father's crown. Not while I have hands to lift a shield, feet to stand, breath to call the charge. Below, the guards changed watch. Above, the stars watched back, cold and honest. In the distance, drums began to beat, slow and heavy. Not for celebration. For the work that comes before a storm. The rainy season came to Zaraland with its usual music, roof-thumping downpours, frogs singing in ditches, and the scent of wet earth that clung to your clothes. But this year, there was another sound, or rather, the absence of one. The war drums in the palace drum hut had been silent for weeks. King Duka was making progress in keeping the borders calm, and for a while, it felt like the kingdom might finally have a long stretch of peace. Amina used those weeks to sharpen her skills. The palace guards had stopped treating her like a child with a stick. She sparred with grown warriors now, sometimes winning, sometimes flat on her back, but always back on her feet. Queen Nia would watch from the colonnade, arms folded, a quiet pride in her eyes. You are more like your father than you know, she told Amina one afternoon. But remember, even a spear cannot defend without a wise hand holding it. One market day, while Duka was away inspecting the farmlands to the east, Amina accompanied her mother into the city. Traders were spread across the square with colorful cloths, baskets of grain, roasted meat, and clay pots. The air was full of roasted maize and spiced beef. Then, the laughter. It was not the laughter of happy people. It was the lazy, mocking kind Amina had come to know too well. Prince Jade walked into the market square with 6 men behind him, all smelling of sour beer. His tunic was half open, his eyes glittering with mischief. He strolled between stalls, snatching fruit without paying, making crude jokes that made women turn away. When he saw Nia, he grinned. "Well, well," he said loudly, "the Queen graces us. Did your king send you to buy more jewels to hang around your neck, or does he keep you locked away until he needs you?" The crowd fell into an uneasy hush. Amina stepped forward before her mother could answer. "Careful, uncle. The people are watching, and you're embarrassing yourself." Jade leaned closer to her. "This mouth of yours will be your undoing, girl. You think you can hide behind your father forever?" "I don't hide," Amina said flatly. "But you hide behind wine and words." The soldiers with Jade shifted, waiting for his signal. For a moment it looked as if he might strike her. Instead, he smirked, threw the half-eaten fruit on the ground, and walked away. His men followed, but not before one of them hissed at Amina, "Enjoy your peace while it lasts." That night, the drums in the palace beat once, a low, warning thump, then fell silent again. Amina didn't sleep. A few nights later, Captain Lithando found Amina in the training yard after most of the guards had gone to their quarters. She was practicing the twist thrust move, pivoting on one foot while driving the spear at an imaginary opponent. Her shadow danced across the dirt. "You fight like someone who has already seen war," Lithando said, walking toward her. "War is always here," Amina replied, not stopping. "It just chooses its day." The captain studied her for a long moment, then said, "If you truly want to protect this kingdom, you must learn not only to fight, but to think like the enemy." That night, under the silver light of the moon, he began teaching her battlefield strategy. They drew maps in the dirt, marking enemy movements with pebbles and counterattacks with sticks. He taught her how to read the wind, how to use terrain to her advantage, how to let the enemy's hunger or arrogance work against them. He even showed her how to fight with 2 weapons, a short stabbing spear in one hand and a throwing spear in the other. "A good warrior keeps more than one answer in her hands," he said. It was during one of these sessions that Queen Nia appeared silently at the edge of the yard, a folded piece of cowhide in her hands. "Your father once gave me this," she told Amina. "I kept it for the son we never had. But I see now, you are enough." She handed it over, a finely worked belt and harness designed to carry multiple weapons. It was light but strong, decorated with beadwork in the colors of Zaraland. Amina buckled it on. It felt like wearing a promise. 2 weeks later, trouble arrived with the dust. Jade's men had been seen near the western farmlands, not raiding, not attacking, but visiting and collecting tribute from frightened villagers. By the time news reached the palace, some farmers had already abandoned their land. King Duka was preparing to ride out when Amina appeared in full warrior gear, leather skirt, chest wrap, beaded harness, her new belt carrying 2 spears, and her cowhide shield strapped to her arm. "You ride with me?" she asked. "Yes," Duka said simply. "And this time, you do not stay at the rear." They reached the farmlands by midday. The villagers were gathered near the well, their faces pale. Jade's men were lounging under a tree, drinking from calabashes, with goats and sacks of grain piled nearby. When Duka and his soldiers approached, the men scrambled to their feet. Jade was not with them, but his second-in-command, a broad man named Goba, stepped forward with a lazy grin. "We were just protecting these farmers, King Duka. A small fee for our troubles." "Return the grain," Duka said. Goba's grin widened. "Or what?" Amina stepped forward before her father could reply. "Or I take it from you myself." The men laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. Goba moved toward her, swinging his club lazily. "Go home, girl. This is men's work." The moment he raised his arm, Amina's shield flashed. She deflected the blow with a hard crack, stepped in, and drove her short spear into the side of his leg. Goba howled and stumbled back. The other men shifted uncertainly. Duka raised his voice. "Take your leader and go. Tell Jade the farms of Zaraland are not his market." The men left, dragging Goba with them, muttering curses under their breath. The villagers cheered quietly, fear still in their eyes, but also something else. Hope. That night, as the fires burned low, Duka stood beside Amina. "You fight well," he said. "But the day will come when you must fight not just for me, but without me." Amina met his gaze. "When that day comes, Uncle Jade will wish he had learned the meaning of my name sooner." It began with laughter, the kind that slithers under a door before the trouble walks in. It was the night of the harvest feast. Drums shook the palace courtyard. Farmers had brought the first yams and maize of the season. Smoke from roasting meat curled into the night sky. Amina moved between the tables, dressed not in warrior gear but in a flowing beaded skirt, her hair wrapped with gold thread. Even warriors must sometimes be part of joy. But joy has enemies. Prince Jade arrived without invitation. His tunic was a loud scarlet, his smile even louder. He carried a gourd of beer as though it were a weapon, drinking deeply between greetings. His men followed, each with their own gourd, pushing through the crowd with the arrogance of men who believe no one can touch them. King Duka's jaw tightened when he saw them, but he did not call for the guards. Peace first. Pride last. It was later, when the moon was high, that the trouble began. Amina was helping Queen Nia distribute gifts to the farmers when Jade appeared in the corridor leading to the women's quarters. The air around him smelled of beer and roasted goat. His eyes slid over Nia in a way that made Amina's stomach turn. "You look lonely, sister-in-law," he slurred. "Your king is busy with his people. I can keep you company." Amina stepped between them without hesitation. "Not tonight. Not ever." Jade's grin widened, but his voice dropped low. "You think your little shield makes you a man? I could break you with one hand." "Try," Amina said. He reached for her wrist. She twisted out of his grip, dropped low, and swept his legs with a kick that sent him crashing into the wall. The gourd rolled away, spilling beer across the floor. Before he could stand, Amina's short spear was at his throat. The corridor went silent, only the muffled thump of drums from the courtyard remained. Jade's eyes burned with humiliation. "You'll regret this, girl." Amina leaned closer. "I regret only that I let you stand up last time." He shoved her away and stormed off, but not before the spear had left a shallow cut along his neck. Later, when Duka asked about the mark, Jade laughed and said it was from a playful accident. Amina said nothing. For weeks, Jade stayed in his own camp. But the quiet was not peace, it was the pause a predator takes before leaping. Duka spent those weeks strengthening the borders. Bandits from the north had begun probing at the edge of Zaraland. Food stores needed guarding. Trade routes needed patrols. One evening, after a long day of hearing disputes, Duka sat alone in the council hut. Amina entered quietly and placed a clay cup of water before him. "Father," she said, "why do you allow Jade so much freedom? Every time you feed him, he grows hungrier." Duka's eyes were tired. "Because blood is heavier than anger. And because the people remember our father's wish, that we remain brothers." "And what of your daughter's wish?" Amina asked softly. "That her mother never again hides behind walls when you are gone." He looked at her for a long moment. "There will come a time when I am not here to hold him back. When that day comes, you will need more than a spear. You will need the people to believe you are their shield." He leaned forward. "Begin visiting the villages. Listen to their troubles. Learn their names. Let them see you before they need you." Amina nodded. The king was still protecting her, but also preparing her for the day when his protection would end. The first time Amina rode with a full patrol, the land seemed wider than she remembered. Red grass stretched to the horizon, rippling in the wind like the surface of a restless sea. They were sent to check on a border village that had gone silent for days. The ride was long, the sun fierce. By the time they arrived, the village was half empty, doors hanging open, cooking fires cold. From the hills beyond, dust rose. Riders. The captain raised his hand. Shields up. The enemy, a mix of rogue warriors and hungry drifters, charged down the slope, shouting. Amina's heart pounded, but her grip on the spear was steady. She kept to the front line beside the captain. The clash was fast and brutal. Shields slammed, spears thrust, dust choked the air. Amina caught one attacker's blade on her shield, shoved hard, and countered with a thrust that sent him tumbling. Another came from the side, she turned, ducked under his swing, and drove her short spear into his ribs. When the dust settled, the raiders were gone, leaving behind only the echo of their screams and the smell of blood in the red grass. The captain clapped her shoulder. You fought like someone who knows she might have to fight again tomorrow. As they rode back, a messenger intercepted them, urgent news from the capital. Prince Jade had entered the council chamber itself, declaring that with no male heir, Zaraland was a bird with a broken wing and needed him to rule alongside Duka before the enemies smell weakness. Amina's knuckles tightened around her reins. She could almost feel the crown's weight, not on her father's head, but already being dragged toward her uncle's greedy hands. The council chamber of Zaraland was built from thick logs, its floor smooth from decades of footsteps. On this day, it felt smaller than ever. King Duka sat at the head of the long table, his father's spear resting against the wall behind him. Jade lounged 2 seats away, dressed in fine beads he had not earned, talking as if the chair were already his. The law of Zaraland is clear, Jade said, his voice smooth as palm wine. A king without a son leaves the kingdom exposed. I offer my hand to share the throne, to strengthen our walls before enemies smell our weakness. The elders murmured among themselves. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided Duka's eyes. Amina stood at the far side of the chamber, hands behind her back. And what will you do for the kingdom, uncle? Bring your beer gourds to the war council? Train the children to drink instead of farm? A ripple of laughter escaped before being quickly swallowed. Jade's face hardened. Careful, girl. One day your tongue will put you in a grave. Amina rose to her feet. If the question is whether I can lead warriors, then let me prove it. Give me a company. Send me where you would send a king. Judge me not by my age but by the peace I can keep. The council fell into murmurs. Jade laughed, though there was unease in his eyes. Yes, send the girl. When she fails, the throne will fall into the hands of one who can hold it. The elders agreed, perhaps to test her, perhaps to silence her. A messenger was sent to Duka with the decision. By the time the king returned, Amina had already prepared her armor, her shield, and the small company of 30 warriors she would lead to guard the southern pass. Duka said nothing for a long time when he saw her ready. Finally, he placed his hand on her shoulder. You are my blood. Do not come back in shame. She looked him in the eye. I will come back in dust before I come back in shame. The southern pass was a strip of land where the hills narrowed and the red soil turned rocky underfoot. Anyone coming into Zaraland from the south had to pass through it, traders, travelers, or invaders. Amina and her 30 warriors arrived at dawn. The air was thin, the wind sharp. She positioned her men along the high ridges, where they could see for miles. Eyes open, she told them. If trouble comes, we meet it before it meets the village. 3 days passed with no sign of trouble. On the 4th, a dust cloud appeared on the horizon, not from traders, but from a war party. The enemy carried broad cowhide shields and short spears, their bodies painted in streaks of white clay. Amina raised her hand. "We hold here." The clash was brutal. Rocks echoed with the sound of metal on metal, shield on shield. Amina's men fought hard, their formation tight. She moved like water among them, deflecting blows, striking when the enemy exposed a weakness. By midday, the attackers broke and scattered into the hills. Amina stood in the pass, breathing hard, her shield dented, her spear tip stained. She had kept the southern gate closed. Word of her victory spread quickly, but so did another piece of news that traveled even faster. King Duka had been called to the far northern border to defend against a larger force. And this time, the fight had been fierce. By the time the messengers returned, they carried only his spear. Like his father before him, Duka had fallen in battle. Amina's chest felt hollow when she received it. She wanted to scream, to break the spear across her knee, to run to where he had fallen and drag him home, but the kingdom had no time for her grief. The same night, as the city mourned, Jade rode into the capital with 50 armed men and a single declaration. "The throne is mine." The funeral pyre was lit in the palace courtyard. Flames licked the night sky, sparks dancing upward like spirits trying to escape. The smell of burning wood and herbs filled the air. Amina stood at the foot of the pyre, her father's spear in her hand. When the last embers cooled, she knelt and pressed her palm into the red soil. Her fingers came up stained, and she lifted them for all to see. "By the blood of my father and the soil of Zaraland," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd, "I swear that no man will take this throne by greed while I can still stand. Let the earth witness me." The people murmured, some in awe, others in fear. Jade, standing at the edge of the courtyard, smirked. Strong words from a girl. But this kingdom needs a king, not an oath. Amina stepped toward him. "You'll get your answer, not in words, but in the field. You want the throne? Come and take it with your spear, not your tongue." The council, torn between tradition and the moment they were witnessing, agreed to a contest, not a private duel, but a battle to decide who could hold the capital. Jade left with his men, promising to return at sunrise with enough warriors to wipe the girl's name from the kingdom's memory. The city of Zaraland did not sleep that night. Women filled water jars for the warriors. Blacksmiths worked their hammers until the stars faded. The drum hut throbbed with the slow, heavy beat that calls soldiers to readiness. Amina walked among her fighters, a mix of palace guards, village warriors, and young men and women who had never fought a full battle but refused to see Jade on the throne. She wore her beaded harness, leather skirt, and chest wrap. Her cowhide shield was freshly reinforced, her father's spear was in her hand. As dawn spread its gold over the red earth, Jade's forces appeared at the far end of the field, nearly twice her number. They were loud, confident, their shields painted with the image of a roaring lion. Amina raised her spear. "Remember, numbers are nothing without courage. Hold the line. Strike when the opening comes. And for the love of this land, do not break." The first clash shook the ground. Shields locked, spears jabbed, dust rose like smoke. Amina moved through the line, blocking, thrusting, shouting orders. She saw fear in the eyes of some of her warriors, and struck her spear against her shield to rally them. Jade himself charged toward her, swinging a heavy-bladed spear. Their weapons met with a clang that rang through the field. "This is your last day as a pretender," he spat. Amina shoved him back with her shield and countered with a thrust that grazed his side. He stumbled but did not fall. The fight raged on around them, the sun climbing higher, the dust turning the air into a red haze. By midday, neither side had broken, but the real battle was just beginning. By the third day, the fighting had stretched beyond the field. Jade's men had pushed toward the city gates, burning grain stores and frightening the villagers. Amina withdrew her forces into the outer ring of the capital, not because they were beaten, but because she had seen something Jade hadn't. War is not always won by the loudest spear. Sometimes it's won by the quietest hunger. She ordered the gates closed and the granaries sealed. Every food source outside the walls was destroyed or carried inside. Let him eat his pride, she told her captains. But even with strategy on her side, the war was leaving scars. On the fourth night, a group of Jade's men slipped through a side path and attacked a small compound near the river. When Amina arrived with her patrol, it was too late for 3 of her soldiers, including Mosi, a young man barely older than she was, who had fought beside her since the southern pass. His widow's wail carried over the water. Amina knelt beside the body, her hands tightening on her father's spear. "No more mercy for him," she said. "From tomorrow, every blow we strike will be a message." Jade had always been a man of appetite. He fought like he lived, charging forward, eating resources as quickly as he gained them. Amina decided to let that habit become his trap. She ordered small squads to harass his supply lines, hitting his grain convoys at night, scattering his cattle, even poisoning a few of his water gourds with bitter herbs that made men too sick to hold a spear. Her warriors moved like shadows, never staying in one place long enough for Jade's larger forces to catch them. Within a week, his men were grumbling. Some deserted entirely, slipping back to their villages. Jade tried to rally them with promises of loot once the city fell, but hunger made those promises sound thin. One evening, a messenger from the enemy camp was caught near the gates, his tunic torn, his voice trembling. "They are eating boiled roots," he said. "And some have started fighting among themselves." Amina's lips tightened. "Good. But do not think a starving enemy is a safe enemy. Hunger makes teeth sharp." Jade, desperate to end the siege, gathered all his remaining strength for one final assault. His men battered at the outer gates from sunrise to midday, rams smashing against the wood, arrows darkening the sky. Amina stood on the wall in her full warrior attire, shield raised, spear in hand. The sun caught the beadwork across her chest, making her look like fire wrapped in leather. When the outer gate finally cracked, she ordered the defenders to fall back to the inner gate, a narrower passage where Jade's numbers would count for less. The clash there was fierce. Dust and sweat turned the air thick, and the sound of iron on iron was like constant thunder. Jade himself forced his way through with a group of his strongest men. He saw Amina at the top of the steps leading to the palace square. "Your father's throne dies today," he shouted. She pointed her spear at him. "Come take it, if you can still stand." They met in the center of the square. His strikes were heavy but wild, hers were sharp and deliberate. When he swung for her head, she ducked and drove the butt of her spear into his knee, making him stumble. He recovered, slashing her arm, but she did not flinch. Around them, the battle raged, but all eyes were drawn to the duel. Then, a sharp call from her left. Captain Lithando had driven back Jade's flank, cutting off his escape. The circle closed around him. Amina pressed, the fighting stopped. Jade's breath came hard. "Kill me, and you stain your hands with family blood." "Leave you alive," Amina said coldly, "and I stain my kingdom with weakness." The square was silent except for the pounding of war drums that had not yet realized the battle was over. Jade knelt in the dust, Amina's spear tip at his throat. Around them, warriors from both sides stood frozen, their shields drooping, their breathing ragged. Captain Lithando stepped forward. "Say the word, and we end this." Amina looked down at her uncle, the man who had mocked her as a child, threatened her mother, and tried to take her father's throne. His eyes still held defiance, but behind it was the truth, hunger, failure, and the knowledge that the kingdom would never call his name again. "You wanted to rule," Amina said, her voice low but carrying across the square. "But you could not rule your greed. You could not rule your men. And you could not rule yourself. She turned to the council elders who had come to witness the battle's end. "What say you?" Elder Simpiwe stepped forward, his staff tapping the stone. "By the law of Zaraland, treason against the throne is death." Amina's jaw tightened. She thought of her father's words, "Blood is heavier than anger," and the red earth oath she had sworn. She lowered her spear, but her voice was steel. "He will not die by my hand. But he will never again see the heart of this kingdom." Jade was dragged to his feet. His weapons and beads were stripped from him. The crowd parted as he was led through the gates, exiled to the far edges of Zaraland, forbidden to return under penalty of death. As the gates closed behind him, the people erupted into cheers that rolled through the streets like thunder. The morning of the coronation, the palace drums began before sunrise, not the heavy rhythm of war, but the proud, rolling beat that spoke of victory and renewal. Amina stepped into the courtyard dressed in full warrior regalia. Her leather skirt and beaded harness gleamed in the early light. Across her back hung her father's spear, on her arm, the cowhide shield she had carried since girlhood. The council elders stood in a semicircle. Elder Simpiwe held the crown, a circlet of gold and carved bone, passed down from the earliest kings of Zaraland. He spoke to the gathered crowd, by her courage in battle, her wisdom in council, and the strength she has shown to protect her people. Amina, daughter of King Duka and Queen Nia, is chosen as ruler of Zaraland. The crown was placed on her head. The drums rose to a deafening roar. Queen Nia stepped forward, her eyes glistening. "Your father would have been proud." Amina turned to the crowd. "My father taught me that the spear belongs not to the one who holds it, but to the people it protects. From this day, my hand and my life are yours. Let Zaraland stand, not because it has a king, but because it has a shield." The cheers shook the very stones of the palace. Warriors lifted their spears. Women ululated. Children danced in the dust. That night, fires burned across the city. Music filled the air. And at the highest tower of the palace, Amina stood alone for a moment, looking out over the kingdom she had fought to keep. The wind caught the beadwork across her chest, making it glitter in the firelight. She touched her father's spear and whispered, "Rest, Baba. The throne is safe." Far below, the drums kept beating, not the drums of battle, but the heartbeat of a united kingdom. Zaraland had a new ruler. Not a king by tradition. A king by right. Amina, warrior princess. This is African Tales by Ijele. Like, share and subscribe. See you in my next video.